A once well-respected profession and widely integrated content has become reduced down to the modern term of adulting. People using the term are creating a new platform for home economics to be advocated for in schools. The only problem is they don't understand that what they're advocating for is family and consumer sciences, and that it already exists. So what happened? How did home economics become null? How come schools aren't visibly teaching content that's so practical and clearly missed? In order to better understand this issue, we need to look at the history of family and consumer sciences. If we analyze the course of the profession and content from a historical perspective, we may be able to understand the reasons it became null. Family and consumer sciences has played a vital part in the growth and development of the American nation. Dating back to the early 19th century, academic articles can be found detailing domesticity. This includes topics on nutrition and health, child rearing, and textiles and apparel. Though most of these articles were written by men, most of the writing was made possible due to the work of women in the field. At this time, home economics as we commonly know the field was referred to as domestic science. Passage of the Morrill Act in 1862 led to the establishment of land-grant colleges in each state. Up until this time, most colleges prepared students by teaching the classics, including language, law, medicine, ministry, and arithmetic. Funding from the Morrill Act allotted for the establishment and expansion of what were considered more practical subjects, such as domestic science, or human ecology by another name, and agriculture. This led to the widespread expansion of home economics within American colleges and laid some initial groundwork for the expansion of home economics into secondary schools. There was always a significant degree of disagreement among home economists and among the legislators, policymakers, and educators who supported them about what the field's mission should be, along with what the field should be called. In 1899, the first meeting of what was deemed now as the Lake Placid Conferences was held. This meeting served to bring together women who were innovating the field to share their advances. It was also at this meeting that the term home economics was unified. Though this meeting received little national attention, it did pave the way for home economics as a professional field by creating the organization of American Association of Home Economics and starting the first home economics academic journal. In 1914, federal backing of home economics and agriculture came in response to a dire need for educational efforts during the Great Depression and wartime. The passage of the Smith-Lever Act led to the establishment of Extension, a community education practice focused on bettering the lives of adults and families by teaching best practices in the field. Women taught everything from conservation, canning and nutrition, to textile repair, to child development, while men farmed. Women eventually took over farming efforts and also began to work in factories as men were called away to war. Finally, in 1917, the Smith-Hughes Act was passed to provide funding for secondary schools to teach agriculture and homemaking. In 1918, the Commission of the Reorganization of Secondary Education, appointed by the National Education Association of the United States, submitted the report, The Cardinal Principles of Secondary Education. Though home economics was certainly not born here, the case for secondary educational concerns surrounding foundational values of home economics may have been. For the purposes of this commission, secondary education was defined as applying to students 12 to 18 years of age. This report was written at the height of the progressive education movement and would become one of the most influential education documents of the 20th century. It was also the product of a long-standing debate of the purposes of a high school education. The committee rationalized that modern high school students were not just to be prepared for elite collegiate careers, but rather for lives that did not include post-secondary education attainment. For this reason, the committee found it important to standardize curriculum to include objectives fit for every student, including health, command of fundamental processes, worthy home membership, vocation, citizenship, worthy use of leisure, and ethical character. These 7 objectives can be considered a foundation for what family and consumer sciences embodies, and we can see public school coursework starting to surround this as these principles were later enacted through home economics and career and technical courses. As wartime efforts and the women's suffrage movement paved the way for more women to enter the workforce, funding for home economics on the political side shifted quickly from home management to workforce development in response to the needs of the state of the nation. The Vocational Education Act of 1963 maintained that funding from the Smith-Hughes Act was only to be used for home economics courses that led to gainful employment. Additionally, the Perkins Act of 1984 mandated funding specifically for career and technical education and workforce development. In 1993, the American Association of Home Economics recognized the occupational shift and changed the name of the profession to Family and Consumer Sciences as we commonly know it today. This maintained that the profession has changed. It was to become inclusive in terms of gender and coursework. Modernly, specified career pathways have made their way into secondary schools. Students are being pressured to identify career pathways at a much younger age, and the prevalence of mandated home economics education has become almost non-existent. While home ec courses are still taught, they're elective and not as valued by students or schools in favor of a more specific curriculum focus. By analyzing family and consumer sciences from a historical perspective, we can now identify reasons why family and consumer sciences has become null. Some of those reasons can be better analyzed through gender and feminist theory. It's important to note that professional women early on in the field of home economics laid the groundwork for the feminist movement. Beecher, a much respected academic, believed and pushed the notion that gender equality would not come from women being able to do the same things as men, but rather provided value by being able to do things that men couldn't. This rationalization would never actually come to fruition because as curriculum remained gendered, women in home economics never gained the value they deserved. And as wartime efforts grew stronger, and women started to enter the workforce, taking over jobs that men would normally perform as they were off to war, the women's suffrage movement grew stronger with a push for women in academia and the workforce. Women began seeing home economics as oppressive, as it kept the feminist movement from moving forward by remaining gendered. Over the years, home economics has received a reputation as confining women to the home, while the movement for women's suffrage has been viewed as liberating women from the home. However, the progressive era movements for home economics and women's suffrage both had shared a common mission: to improve the condition of women in American society. Although home economics seemed socially conservative and constraining for women, it actually helped to develop women's study programs at Cornell, as well as other universities, with its feminist perspective on gender. It's important for us to realize that the feminist movement paved way for women in the workforce, but that this may have been directly impacted by the work of home economists. The difference was that home economists and feminists did not agree on ways that women could be liberated, leaving home economics to take a deep back seat. Some additional reasons for the null curriculum, beyond what can be analyzed through gender and feminist theory, are as follows. First, family and consumer sciences has always been broad, but vague in pitch. The many name changes, the lack of clarity of the mission, and the ever-changing curriculum in response to political and societal pressures led to a misunderstanding of what family and consumer sciences is to accomplish and all that encompasses. As a family and consumer sciences teacher, I do many things, but I find it very hard to pitch my profession to others. Second, similarly, the funding that was allocated for home economics programs drove the content of what was to be taught. With no consensus on a core family and consumer sciences curriculum, as well as little funding from any other backing, family and consumer sciences became malleable to what funding was available mandated for it, which led way to the occupational over home management shift. Another reason for the shift, the occupational shift additionally created an ambiguity for who is to be able to teach FCS content. Home management, as a thing of the past and undervalued as a school content, was left to be taught in combination by parents at home and family and consumer sciences teachers, and there's a significant lack of adaptation of family and consumer sciences courses to modern day lives. Specific courses grew out of occupational funding, such as culinary and fashion design, and schools are more and more demanding that professionals with field experience teach these courses. Finally, family and consumer sciences professionals lack a presence at the political level to advocate for family and consumer sciences as a valuable tool in schools. Although we, as FCS professionals, see family and consumer sciences as something inherent, we have a hard time convincing others of that. So what happened to family and consumer sciences? Why has it become null? The answer is still there, it still exists, but the field is looked at externally as entirely different. Unfortunately, the lack of clarity of mission, the misaligned perspectives between feminists and home economists, and the backingness shift to an occupational focus over home management has completely changed how the field operates. As home economics has become neglected, we can now see people asking for the reintegration of home economics in schools, even if they are terming it adulting. I believe family and consumer sciences professionals have a responsibility to take control of this reintegration, and in doing so, or not, that will directly impact the course of family and consumer science.